Agni mide purohitam yagyasya devam ritvijam hotaram ratnadhatamam. These are the opening words of the Rigveda, the oldest surviving text of ancient India. It could have begun with creation, or with the heavens, or the mightiest of the devata. Instead, it begins with Agni. Even today, a Hindu couple circles the sacred fire before beginning married life. Every Yagni offers its prayers through Agni, and in life's final journey, Agni is present once again. Why has this one deity remained at the heart of Hindu rituals for thousands of years? Who is Agni to the people who composed the Rigveda? To answer that, we must set aside late legends and listen to the oldest voice we have, the Rigveda itself. But before we ask who Agni was, we should first see how the Rigveda describes his birth. The Rigveda calls Agni immortal, and yet Agni is born again and again. So how can a deity be immortal if he is born every time the sacred fire is kindled? To understand this mystery, we have to return to the Vedic Yagni itself. Before a Yagni, the Ritvij would take two pieces of wood, the Arani, and begin to churn them together. One of the Rigveda's most beautiful verses describes what lies within. Aranyo nirhito jataveda garbha eva sudito garbhidishu. Wood turns against wood, smoke appears, a spark emerges, and Agni is born. To the Vedic Rishi, this was not simply the making of fire. Agni was born from the Arani, yet the fire was already present within them, waiting to emerge. And so, an eternal Agni could be born again and again. Not because he ceased to exist, but because he could return to the visible world whenever the fire was kindled. This is the mystery of Agni. The eternal could be born. He was not simply a god of fire. For the Vedic Rishi, he was the messenger between human and the deva. He was called Dut, who carried offerings between the humans and the divine world. He was called the Hotar, who received these offerings. He was the Purohit, who stood before the sacrifice. And he was Jataveda, the one who knows all births. But the Rishis did not only describe what Agni did, they also gave him a form. They called him Hiranyakesha, golden-haired, and Sochishkesha, flame-haired. His blazing tongues rose towards the offering, turning the physical flame before them into a living, radiant presence. The Rigveda calls him Atiti, an honored guest. Before the Yagni, the sacred grass, the Barhi, was prepared and Agni was invited to take his place. So, the Yagni was not simply an offering placed into a flame. Agni was being welcomed. The fire was treated as a divine guest who would carry the offering onward. And Agni's presence did not end with the Yagni. The Vivaha Sukta, the Rigveda's famous wedding hymn, gives Agni a remarkable active role. Agni leads the bridal procession, and when the bride enters her new home, the hymn invokes Rai, prosperity, abundance, and wealth that sustains a household. Agni is asked to be part of that transition, to carry the bride from one stage of life into another, and to bless the new household with life, prosperity, and well-being. So Agni was not merely a silent witness to marriage. He stood at the center of a new household being created. And that tells us something important about the Vedic Agni. He was not only the fire of sacrifice, he was the fire around which human life was built. But if Agni is born from wood on earth, why he is the Devata? Why would the Vedic Rishi worship something that human beings could kindle with their own hands? Because for them, Agni was never limited to the flame in front of them. The Rigveda speaks of Agni in many forms. He is on earth as the fire kindled in the Yagni. He is in the waters. He is connected with heaven, and his radiance extends through the world. One hymn even speaks of Agni as having three births: in heaven, in the waters, and here among human beings. So, the fire produced from the Agni was not merely an ordinary earthly fire that had been declared divine. It was one manifestation of a much larger Agni. And this is where the Vedic idea becomes fascinating. The Rishis could kindle Agni with wood, but they did not believe they had created the Devata. They had brought one of his forms into their world. That is also why Agni could have different relationships and different births in the hymns. Sometimes he is born from the Agni. Sometimes Dhyava and Prithvi are described as his parents. Sometimes the waters give him birth. And Matriswan is remembered as the one who brought Agni to the humankind. So Agni does have something resembling a family in the Rigveda, but not a single family tree. His many births describe the many places and ways in which the same divine fire appears. And perhaps that is why Agni mattered so much. He was the one Devata who could be seen, touched, kindled, fed, and yet was never merely the physical fire itself. He stood at the boundary between the human and the divine. The Rishis could make the flame appear, but the power they believed had appeared before them was Agni, the Devata. And perhaps this is why the Rigveda begins with Agni, because before the Rishis could speak to the Devatas, there had to be a way to reach them. Agni was that way. He took what belonged to the human world, the offering, the prayer, the voice, and carried it towards the divine. He connected what could be seen with what could not. He connected earth with heaven. And perhaps that is why the very first words of the Rigveda are addressed to him. Before the Rishis asked about the universe, they first learned how to speak to it. And their first messenger was Agni. This was the episode about Agni from Rigveda. In the next episode, we meet the Devata whose thunder shakes the hymns of the Rigveda, Indra.